All right, today we are going to actually get into multiplication. Multiplication at the primary grades, not a whole lot done with multiplication in the primary grades. You'll notice that your homework for the multiplication section, I'm not going to change any of the due dates even though I am flipping the class times around. You'll notice you're going to be doing a whole number multiplication, and you're going to be doing and reviewing decimal multiplication. So I will go through your own math skills for a little bit, but let's begin with multiplication at the primary level is merely an introduction. Okay, they are not going to be doing multiplication problems that have more than a digit or two in the multiplier and the multiplicand. Okay, they're just going to be introducing multiplication at basically the multiplication fact level. They're going to need to understand what multiplication is. So what do we do with that? We use manipulatives, correct? And further in the semester, we're going to have a manipulatives lecture, and I am going to use multiplication as my illustration of how to do manipulatives. So I'm not going to go over the manipulative use until that time. But multiplication at the primary level is an introduction. We're not going to be teaching very much procedure at all. Remember, we are teaching from scratch, and we are we're building, we're digging even. We're digging and building their arithmetic foundation. So multiplication in the primary grades 1 and 2 is an introduction only. Multiplication is a major concept and procedure in grade 3. So we'll delve a little bit into grade 3. But teaching primary, first and second, multiplication is merely an introduction. We are only going to be teaching concept, very little procedure. We're not going to be setting up multiplication problems. We're not going to learn about the partial products that we have to use when we have more than one number in our multiplier. We're not going to do that until 3rd grade. So let's talk about primary multiplication, introducing multiplication to 2nd graders, maybe a smidge to the 1st grade. So we're going to be introducing the idea of multiplication to 2nd graders. All right, and how are we going to do that? We're going to do that with concept, right? We have to teach them what multiplication is. So the concept here, because we are digging the foundation, so we have to start with concept of what multiplication means, what multiplication is. All right, so when we're teaching about multiplication, we have to teach multiplication terminology. And that involves factor times factor equals product. Okay, so we will teach terminology. But even before we give those words, we have to start with the word multiplication, multiply, and times. So we're digging a foundation in multiplication here. We are starting from square one, from scratch. How are we going to do that? Well, we are going to work on concept. Okay, with concept, we are going to have to show them and get them to understand what multiplication is. Okay, so here's the question for you. What is multiplication? I said we will use manipulatives to do this, won't we? Okay, we're going to use manipulatives. Got a little bit of wet going on here from the eraser. We are going to use manipulatives. How? What are we going to show them? What is multiplication? Does anybody know? Yes?
Basically just adding with like quantities? Or
Real close, not like quantities.
pairs?
Not pairs. It's repeated addition. So it's not like, it's identical, okay? So what is multiplication? It is repeated addition, or as you said, it's addition of, we're doing multiple add-ins, quite literally, aren't we? Multiple add-ins that are the same. That's where we get our word multiplication. So I am going to use the number 3. I don't use the number 2 because of the fact that if I use 2 with showing you what I'm going to show you, it gives you a little bit of a misconception. So I'm going to stay away from 2. The reason I don't like 2 is because multiplication is repeated addition. Exponents is repeated multiplication. And so I never use 2 because 2 squared is the same as 2 times 2. And that causes a problem. So I want to use 3. I also stay away from 4. 3 is a nice prime number to work with, so you don't have any, you don't begin any misconceptions or propagate any myths, okay? So what is multiplication? We're adding multiple 3s. Got it? So it's a shortcut. So we can present it and promote it as a shortcut. Instead of me doing 3 plus 3 plus 3, one at a time. 3 plus 3 is 6. So 2 3s are 6. Then plus 3 again. 3 plus 3 plus 3 is what? 9. 3, 6, 9. What does that remind you of? Okay, well, so not only am I going to go to, not only am I going to relate it to addition, I am going to tether it to what? Counting. What did I just do? 3, 6, 9. What's next? 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30, 33, 36. I'll stop at 36. Why? It's 3 times 12. That's probably all the farther I'm going to go with their times tables eventually. So we're going to tether it to counting by 3s. That's what I'm doing. And I keep doing it. I don't want to do 3 plus 3 is 6. Okay. 6 plus 3 is what? 9. Where was I? 9 plus 3 is 12. No, this is a shortcut for repeated addition. 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 is the same as 3 times 4. Now here's where I have trouble. Multiplication is commutative. So 4 times 3 and 3 times 4 are both 3. So I have to make sure I write it in the right order as the teacher, because normally I don't pay attention to which way I write it. But now I have to pay attention to that. This is primary math. I don't pay attention to how I write my numbers in Algebra 1, do I? When we get going in there, they're lucky if they can read. No, I'm not that bad, but I'm not as bad as Mr. Reinhardt. If you had him in high school, math. But, all right, do you get the point though? I don't care how I write my numbers in Algebra 1. I don't care the order that I put my factors in Algebra 1. But I don't pay attention, do I? In fact, in Algebra 1, I'm doing alphabetical order because I'm using abstract variables instead of actual numbers. But in 7th grade math, I don't pay attention to how I write my numbers and the order that I write things in. If it's addition and multiplication, I don't pay attention to which number I write first. But that doesn't work in primary. I have to pay attention to every detail. Okay? That's why teaching multiplication from scratch in grades 2 and 3 is a whole lot harder than teaching them how to do regular multiplication in grade 5, right? Okay, so you're digging and building the foundation for your students for them to understand multiplication when they get to 5th grade. And they can distinguish between how to multiply by a decimal versus how to add with decimals. So we want to make sure that we pay attention to everything. So, and I want to keep repeating it and repeating it, and I want to tether it to counting. So long before well actually we'll do counting by twos, and in second grade they learn the twos first, but I'm going to avoid it just so I don't make a mistake. But we've already been counting, first of all, counting by ones. That to me is counting. We'll already have been counting by fives and tens, so it's easy to go to 5 times 10, but we don't want to go that high in our times tables just yet. So we will start with the twos, and we will start with the threes, and long before we're teaching multiplication in second grade, we've been counting by twos and threes since first grade, okay? So now they should be comfortable with this. If they're comfortable with counting by threes and twos and so forth, different countings, they're not going to have any trouble with their times tables. So we're going to count by threes. 3, 6, 9, 12. So what is 3 plus 3 plus 3? It's 12. What's another way we can write this? We can use times. And we have to introduce the cross little times sign and the word times and the word multiply and so forth. Multiplication is repeated addition. Instead of doing 3 manually, we'll say it that way, instead of manually adding 3 at a time, we're just going to do 3 times 4, and that is 12. Wait, there. I did it right. 12. I never write 12 like the top number. And of course, see my threes? All right, so you guys are college students, so I don't have to pay attention to that detail. But what are you going to have to do if you student teach? You're going to have to write 12, not 12, because that is cursive-y, okay? And so we'll fix it. And that has to be a square, and then it goes over. And I'm going to attempt the 3. Let's see. Let's see. I'm going to start here. Nice round ball. Come back around.
I want to see you do an 8.
You want to see me do an 8? Fat. Think. Oh, not too bad. Let's erase it. I'm going to erase that. Okay. Oh, got a wet eraser. That 3 looks awful. Do you see why? It's going to be hard because, well, I don't have any lines. My bottom, it's not a snowman. So the top and the bottom have to be the same size. Okay. So this 3 is not too bad. All right, so do you see that you will have to pay attention and you will have to practice your primary number formation? All right, now that I've made a mess of the blackboard, that eraser is wet. So is this one. I've got water on the chalk tray. Yeah, now I do, yes. Anyway. Apparently, these classes are being advertised as live. This is live, right? So, anyway.
I think I listened to all the comments.
All right. So, with multiplication, we are going to start it from scratch, and we've got to get them to understand what it is. I do have a pretty bad design going there. We do want them to understand what it is, but then we also want to do what with it? What else do we want to do with it? All right, think about the 7 steps of the teaching progression. We have terminology. What's number 2? Facts. So as I'm doing the understanding of what multiplication is, What else am I going to do? I'm going to be introducing what during drill time? I'm going to open up a box of multiplication flashcards. So simultaneously, as I'm teaching about what multiplication means, and I'm showing them that 3 times 4, and I'm teaching them that 3 times 4 is 3 plus 3 plus 3. I'm teaching them that 3 times 4 is 3, 6, 9, 12. I'm teaching them that it's no different than counting. I'm also pulling out and using the 3 times tables on flashcards. So we're doing multiple things. We are understanding and getting together in our minds what we're doing when we're multiplying. We are seeing how multiplication is written, and we're memorizing multiplication facts all at the same time, so then we don't have to worry about them not understanding it, and we don't have to worry about them not recognizing it. And so we're doing it all simultaneously so that the drill is reinforcing the teaching, the counting is reinforcing the teaching. They're all working together to reach the student's understanding, but then also having them memorize those times tables so that we can start using them down the road. So multiplication at the primary level involves answering the question, what is multiplication? Multiplication is repeated addition. I am adding, in this case, I'm adding multiple 3s, aren't I? Okay, and then I've got to tether that to my counting by 3s. I am using my fingers, okay? All right, but I am using my fingers as a manipulative, okay, because I am tethering it to counting. But we won't use it once we have done our drill. So my drill is going to counteract my counting, but because multiplication, that's how students do use their fingers and so forth. I guess they use it, I don't know, if I did use my fingers, I don't remember using my fingers, but anyways. So you are digging and building the multiplication foundation, and you need to do a good job of it. You need to do it with the 2s, the 3s, the 4s, and the 5s. Multiple times as you are introducing the 2s in your flashcard, as you're adding the 3s in your flashcard time, as you're adding the 5s next. Then come back to the 4s. We've been counting by 5s for a long time, so they can see how easy the 5 times tables are because they've been counting by 5s since kindergarten. Okay, so we're going to teach primary multiplication from scratch. So what is multiplication? It's repeated addition just as much as exponents. What are exponents? They are repeated. So this is 3 times 4, which equals 12, and this is 3 to the 4th power, which is 81. A little harder to do the repeated multiplication than the repeated addition. Okay? So in your mind, you probably knew a lot easier that exponents are repeated multiplication than you remembered that multiplication is repeated addition. And see, once we get to algebra and upper mathematics in general, there's only 3 operations: addition, multiplication, and exponents or powers. We don't need subtraction and division much in algebra. Okay? So they're not as foundational. As a matter of fact, subtraction always gets bundled with addition, and division will get bundled with multiplication. As a matter of fact, division is much closer related to multiplication, then addition. When you're teaching subtraction, you don't ask what plus 6 equals 15, usually. Okay, you've already done that a little bit when you taught the flashcards and so forth. All right, so when you're teaching primary multiplication, you are going to center in on the idea of what is multiplication. You are going to practice it and tether it to counting. Remember, what did we say about general math principles? We always relate the unknown to the known. So with multiplication, counting by threes is our known that we're going to tether our multiplication to. So teaching multiplication requires the use of manipulatives. Teaching multiplication requires that you reach their understanding. And teaching multiplication requires that you are simultaneously reinforcing with the flashcards and the drill. You don't start with the flashcards and the drill. You do it simultaneously so that they are seeing what it is and they're practicing and memorizing, and it's coming together, and they're seeing it with respect to what they already know, the counting, they know addition, and so we're going to be teaching it that way. So make sure that you teach your primary multiplication by first of all showing them what multiplication is. That requires the use of manipulatives. Then you're also striving to reach their understanding so they know what it is, and then you're going to tether it to what they already know. The familiar counting is going to be tethered to the unfamiliar multiplication. And then the third idea was that simultaneously you're going to be introducing and reinforcing with your flashcards during drill time. So you're employing their memory, you're employing their understanding, and you're tethering all at once. Okay, and then the last thing is repeat the same procedure with, I use the threes, so you're going to probably start with the twos, but you're going to repeat the same procedure, whether it's the twos, start it from scratch, start the threes from scratch, start the fours from scratch, start the fives from scratch. And you'll probably do it in the order 2, 3, 5, and come back to 4. Okay? Because do we count by sixes? No. So that's going to require extra attention. But if I've already done my job, they've seen the twos, they've seen the threes, they've seen the fives, then they've seen the fours, it's going to be a lot easier for them to pick up than the sixes. They'll already have the understanding, and then we'll start reinforcing it with the memorization, and then the multiplication can be applied later. And that's third grade. Okay? So third grade multiplication, third grade is we're transitioning out of the primary. Third grade multiplication is going to review and even repeat some of what we did in second grade. We may do it all at once, the twos and the threes and the fives and the fours all at once, but we need to start back in third grade to solidify. What if we didn't quite get it in second grade? So even in third grade, we are going to go back and solidify the foundation that was poured in second grade. We will go back and teach them what is multiplication. We will go back and teach them or remind them about counting. We will go through and spend much of our drill time in grade 3 memorizing the times tables. Because then, second semester or so down the road in third grade, what are we teaching? How to actually do full-fledged multiplication problems. And we're going to have to teach them how to carry, and we're going to have to teach them how to put their partial products, and so forth. Okay, so you will, in the primary grades, teach subtraction, addition, yes, but even multiplication from scratch. Even if in second grade we're never really going to do any real multiplication problems, we have to get that started for the third graders. The third graders will be doing a lot of multiplication. When I think of third grade math, I think of multiplication and just introducing long division. When I think of fourth grade, I think of long division and fractions. When I think of fifth grade, I think of more fractions and a lot of division. When I think of fifth grade, then we start the decimals, okay? And a tiny bit of percents. Each grade has a really important building aspect to it, which is why, if all possible, you want to have a whole curriculum. And you have a good curriculum that's going to help you with that building process, so that you have given them their second grade, math has given them their foundation for third grade. So second grade math, you are pouring the you're pouring the multiplication foundation. All right, in the last few minutes here, I want to review multiplication for college students, okay? You're going to be doing the whole number multiplication in the textbook, that's section 1.4, and the decimal multiplication in chapter 3. So with multiplication, make sure that if you're teaching it, that you're up on your times tables and you're not rusty, okay? And also then, obviously, you have your math skills beyond primary with multiplication. So let's go back and review. Let's go back and review basic multiplication. And look at this. Once the eraser gets wet, there's not a whole lot I can do about it. This one's better. Okay, so basic multiplication. Basic multiplication of whole numbers, basic multiplication of decimals, and so forth. Multiplication does not follow the law, does it? If I was doing this particular problem with addition, I would have to line up the decimal points, no matter how off kilter the problem looks. Because I can only add tenths to tenths, hundreds to hundreds, fifths, or thousands to thousands. But we have to remember about the differences between addition and multiplication then. Don't forget that multiplication is not tied to likes. What do? We multiply this 8 through the entire problem. So I am multiplying it times the ones place, the tens place, and the hundreds place. So with multiplication, your problem with multiplication is probably going to be carelessness and forgetting a few of your times tables. Okay, so make sure that your multiplication skills are up to par, whether we have just a basic whole number, and whether or not then we start sprinkling in some decimals and getting the decimal place correct. Remember to carry properly, and actually the main thing here is going to be your place value. And then forgetting a times table, like 8 times 7 is 56, 6 times 3 is 54. That one gets mixed up all the time. Okay, so anyways, 8 times 5 is 40, 8 times 1 is 8, and we carried a 4, so we have to make this 12 and carry a 1. 8 times 3 is 24, plus our 1 is 25. 2 times 5 is 10. 2 times 1 plus 3 is 2, plus the 1, and so forth. All right, I automatically scoot this guy over. Why? Because the 2 is in the tens place, so when I do the multiplication here, I have to start my partial product in the tens place. Now, having the 5 there has these extra zeros, which can cause a problem. This is not a zero, extra zero. It is the product of 5 and 8. This is not an extra zero either. It is the product of 2 and 5. These are the partial products. Keep everything neat and aligned. These are some of the things that have to be reinforced, taught in third grade. Third grade deals with the partial products. Third grade deals with the carrying that you see. And so when we start doing actual multiplication in grade 3, we are going to try to avoid carrying at first and so forth. But we have to teach every aspect. All right, and then the problem with being so much higher in your own math skills than your first graders and your second graders and your third graders and your fourth graders, any of them, hopefully, is that you have to cover every little detail. Because I'm going to multiply this without thinking about it. I don't think about the carrying, it just comes through. Third graders have no experience with the larger multiplication problems. They're in the times table range. They're in the single digits range. So we have to introduce from scratch every detail in procedure. But we also have to explain why, don't we? So your math skills here should be so far beyond the third grade math skills that you're going to have to stop and think about paying attention to every detail, paying attention to where you place, paying attention to teaching the carrying. I know they carry with addition, but this is an entirely different type of problem. So the problem with these larger multiplication is we've got addition in here too, don't we? When I do the partial products here, I'm adding. Don't put a 15 here, because we're programming, we're multiplying. No. I have to add my partial products. And since this is addition, I have to add like places. That's why I have to scoot this guy over, this number over. So I have to continually stress about my quotient, my partial product placement, and the fact that I have to add the two numbers together. Essentially, what I'm doing here is I am multiplying by the 8, right? And then I'm multiplying by 2. No, I'm multiplying by 20. So then I am getting 0. I have to start here. When I'm actually doing the multiplication, I'm starting multiplying by 20. So, in fact, it might even look better this way. I get 10, 3, 6. So this is 6,000. 8 times 315 gives me the 2,500 or 2,520, but I'm multiplying 20. That gives me 6,000. So then I'm adding 6,000 to 2,000. Okay, so I have to teach this, and this is a lot of procedure. Many times by third grade, our emphasis is switching from taking the concepts we learned in first and second grade, we're switching to now being able to use them in a multi-step problem. So what is the key phrase when we're teaching procedure that I want you to remember in our progression? Remember we said terminology, what? Use it. We said facts, automatic. We said concept, success is, what did we say about procedure? One at a time, please. So this is a complex multiplication problem for a third grader. So we do one at a time, please. I have to first teach carrying, right? And so I am not going to teach carrying with a 2-digit problem here, am I? I'm going to teach carrying with a single-digit multiplier. So when you are in third grade and you're switching from taking concepts of what multiplication is, and now you are applying it to a multi-step, you have to spend a lot of time on procedure. Maybe they're not going to quite understand why right now, but what you're going to do, you need to understand why right now, but what the students are going to center in on is the procedure of how to do these bigger multiplication problems. So I have to follow the rule when I'm teaching new procedures and when I'm teaching multi-step problems. I have to introduce one new procedure at a time. So I'm going to start with carrying, aren't I? And I'm going to stick with a single-digit single-digit multiplier. So I can concentrate on carrying. Then I will teach partial products later, separately, one thing at a time. We don't want information overload. You've been probably in classes where you've gotten information overload. And what happens? When there's two things going on, you're trying to figure out them both, and then maybe they're two different things, and you're not going to learn either, are you? So one thing at a time. And so with primary multiplication, we are, once we get our foundation set in first and second, third grade, multiplication is critical. Third graders have to learn their multiplication tables. Drill, 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 drill. Write, 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 write. Send home, require flashcards at home. Drilling at home. Drilling at school. Lunchtime. Okay? They have free time. Let them play with the flashcards. Okay? Things like that. Have games that involve multiplication facts or addition facts or whatever. So one procedure at a time. This has carrying in it. It needs to be covered by itself and solidified first. Then we'll pull in the second digit in the multiplier and introduce the partial products. Okay, this is way down the road in grade 5. But do you remember how to do it? Because that basic skills test is coming by the basic skill test is coming. Remember, when we do this, we are going to 35, carry the 3. There's 4 decimal places in the problem, so I have to have 4 decimal places in the answer. 1, 2, 3, hold the 0. Okay, so I want you to practice some of your own decimal multiplication as well. Remember, you don't decimal justify because we don't have to worry about like places. What we have to do then is make sure that I have this in terms of thousands, right? And this is in terms of hundreds. The denominator would be, or tens. The denominator would be 10. The denominator here would be 1,000. So I have to have the 4 zeros here. 245. I have to have the 4 zeros here. So I have to have the 4 zeros here so that the decimal answer matches the fraction answer. So the same number of places here in both the multiplicand and the multiplier have to be in the product. Don't forget that. All the places here. And also, you'll notice I follow protocol whenever I write decimals. If there's no whole number, I hold a 0 in its place. Okay? So this is important. It emphasizes the decimal, and it's how decimals are written. Okay, so working on your basic skills here. That quiz will be up on Schoology, and then the motivational idea will be due on the 6th, irregardless of who teaches the class. Everything, I'm not going to change the due dates. And then the number concepts theme folder is coming that test day as well. Okay? All right, we'll see you next week.